Welcome to Tech Talent Unlocked. I'm Anthony Ginn, and this is a series of podcasts where we speak into thought leaders about a range of topics that are close to our heart here at my organisation, iQuad. We'll be exploring digital skills gap, skills development, social mobility, diversity, inclusion, and much, much more. And today we've got episode 4, which we will be exploring the impact of the digital skills gap. I'm really pleased to say that we've got Sandy Begbie, who is the Chief Executive of the Scottish Financial Enterprise. Sandy's also previously had senior roles across financial service organisations, covering roles such as COO and Director of People, Organisation and Culture. Sandy, thanks so much for being with us today. Thanks so much for giving us some time. Before we kind of jump into the topic at hand and start discussing some of the points that you've seen, I think it'd be great just to kind of tell our listeners a little bit more about the SFE and what your goals in and why that really gives you a very nice holistic view within your region as well. So over to you.
Great, and thanks, Anthony, and thank you for the opportunity. So SFE has been the trade body for financial and professional services here in Scotland since the mid-80s, and we have currently over 90 members, and as an industry we employ over 160,000 people here in Scotland. So as we talk today, the industry is one of the biggest contributors to the Scottish economy, both in terms of jobs, but also in terms of exports and also attracting inward investment. So it's important that as SFE we represent the industry, but also have a strong voice across Scottish and UK governments and across the entire political spectrum. SFE, on behalf of the industry, we launched a sector strategy back in May, and in many ways that shapes our focus for the next few years with 4 key themes: journey to net zero, supporting economic recovery, responding to evolving customer needs as it relates to financial services needs, and probably really important for this conversation is skills and inclusion. And those were the 4 things that the industry themselves said were the areas, the strategic areas that they could come together, collaborate, and wanted to focus across industry. So in many ways that's going to shape what we do over the next few years as an organisation, and use our convening power and our ability to draw people together to further those strategic agendas.
Amazing. Well, from that perspective, it gives us a great holistic view to pick your brain on and get your thoughts from. I mean, jumping into the first kind of point that I wanted to discuss with you is that there's been so much kind of change, so much impact, I should probably say, over the last kind of 5 years or so, really, stemming from kind of politically, from Brexit, and then latterly through to obviously the pandemic. And I just wanted to get your thoughts about how that's kind of maybe enhanced and what sort of issues around the digital skills gap that's kind of created, and get your thoughts about that.
I think it's a good question, Anthony. I mean, my view is that if neither COVID or Brexit had happened, we still would have been facing into a skills gap in the industry. I think both those events may well have shone a more of a spotlight on them and have made them more acute. But I think that as an industry, we've changed so much in the last few years, particularly in that whole digitalization space. So when we pulled together our strategy, one of the things that we did was an in-depth questionnaire as part of the first phase to understand really what was on the mind of our members. And the number one issue internally, almost 50% of those who responded, was the whole digitalization of their platforms, their distribution, their products, etc. There's no doubt COVID has accelerated that. I think that came quite clear. But as I say, I think even if those 2 events hadn't happened, I still think that we would have been facing into a change in the skill set required in the industry today, but also in the next 3 to 5 years, that is going to be important that we address if the industry and the sector is going to continue to flourish here in Scotland.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there's been so many adjustments to company strategies, the way that they're trying to execute their business, and obviously that kind of shift over the last 18 months to the ability for us all to work within a digital environment as well has certainly changed the typical groundwork as such as organizations operated in the past. And I'm trying to, obviously you have this holistic view, and you're discussing with not just companies, but you also obviously have conversations with the government about how you're trying to address this. And, we spoke in the previous episode with Nicola Anderson from FinTech Scotland, and talking about some of the actual pieces that are embedded in there. I mean, you mentioned in your strategy for skills and inclusion, some of the initiatives that I imagine must be coming out to the fore of what you guys want to promote and push over the next kind of 2-3 years. And just wanted to be great to hear an insight into your thought process about that and where across probably the timeline it's going to make an impact.
Yeah, so I think a lot of this starts in schools, Anthony, in the way that the industry positions itself and explains to young people the type of careers and opportunities that exist in our industry. And I think many industries are going through a similar process at the moment. I'd like to think that we're slightly ahead of many, whereby we're really thinking about how do we, and the question I ask is, if I'm a 14-year-old, 15-year-old in a secondary school and are interested in a career in financial services, then what are we going to tell them? And there's an interesting data point on this, which is young people who have no connection with financial services, i.e. they don't have family or friends that work in it, less than 10% of them would consider financial services as a career. That number goes up to over 40% where they have family or friends who work in the industry. So there's a real perception gap issue that we need to close. And a lot of that is because the perception is, if we're being really honest with ourselves, that careers in financial services are still viewed as a career for someone who's well educated, usually someone who's gone on to university, someone who has got a financial background, and quite often viewed by people who from a white middle class background. And that's why we've called the strategic theme skills and inclusion, because the industry needs to make sure that it's not only attracting more people into the sector by explaining the type of careers that are available to them, but actually broadening out the diversity and inclusion of young people who are coming into the industry from all different backgrounds, whether it's different socioeconomic backgrounds, whether it's different ethnicity backgrounds, whether it's young people who may well have particular strengths at schools, but they don't think that can translate into a career in financial services. The reality is that these days there are many, many different careers and career paths in financial services. It could be in data, it could be in digital, it could be in cyber, tech, you name it. And actually, we need to make sure that young people really understand opportunities exist, but also say to them that actually, regardless of your background, there are opportunities for you in our industry. And if we can do that, and we've already started to explain that story in schools through what's known as our Unified Schools programme, where we've started to take that into schools, into every secondary school in Scotland, and actually start to help young people make informed judgments and to think about careers in financial services in a different way to how they've maybe thought about them in the past.
Absolutely, getting that approach right to open their minds and hopefully explain to these young people that it is, there is a real opportunity across business operations, across technology. There's so much opportunity throughout these organizations. And I previously worked within the industry, and it gives a lot of opportunity, and you don't truly realize actually until you're in the inside. And I think it's down to the sector to be able to try and push that promotion as well, and help young people understand the different types of roles there are there, because it's a phenomenal employer, but also can satisfy from a technical perspective, but also from a cultural as well. I think that the organisations have done a lot of work, and especially now in the new way of working. I think that's probably helped them further adapt, to the way of having more of a balanced work-life kind of career, and hopefully will become more appealing for young people. So we could try and address this digital skills gap. I'm just jumping through onto that as well. I mean, on the actual digital skills that you've seen, throughout your research and the work that you've done with companies, was there any kind of top running themes that they were seeing as a shortage of the skills, and kind of for the immediate and for the future as well?
Yes, and I think a piece of work we're doing at the moment, Anthony, is to really, through workshops with members, just to really get that granular detail around just specifically what's needed. But we've already done some of that, so I can give you some headlines around that. Because the term digital is in some ways slightly thrown around, and of course encompasses a lot of different types of skills and experiences once you drill down to it. So, in no particular order, what I would say is that there's certainly something around the digitalization of the customer journey. So, that end-to-end, seamless, frictionless journey for customers from the point at which they engage with a firm, right through to being able to operate on a day-to-day basis. And of course, we all know through our own experiences, not only within financial services, but other industries that we deal with, that at times that there are friction points that exist on that customer journey. And I think that a lot of financial services firms are focusing on is how do you make that customer journey as seamless and as frictionless as possible, because friction points, create cost. It creates manual workarounds, but also it creates customer dissatisfaction. So the more you can do in that area, the better. I think, secondly, the use of data in that digital marketing space as well. So how do you really mine the data that you have in a way that you can then really utilize to bring added value and propositions to customers? And how do you fold that into that marketing area as well? And so that's definitely another one that comes through quite strongly in terms of how do you use that digitalization of your business in order to provide those marketing opportunities. And then the third one as well, which I think is really important, which again comes through strongly in the strategic theme around customer, is that we really need to be really mindful, and the regulator it talks about this a lot, around vulnerable customers and financial inclusion. And actually, how do we make sure that people aren't left outside of the financial services system? And how do we, as an industry, have different skills inside industry to help people either connect or remain connected with the financial services, because, as we well know, there are many people in society who are concerned about dealing with banks, may have some personal vulnerabilities which may open them up to potential fraud or other issues, and we need to give them confidence that actually the industry is looking after them, and we have the skills in order to be able to help them, and give them comfort that their interests are also the interests of the firms, because people need bank accounts to get jobs in order to in order to provide them with that livelihood. So there's a danger sometimes that we look at a lot of this and think this is great, but actually there's a portion of the population who we cannot leave behind.
Absolutely, it's amazing to hear that last point as well. It's something that certainly for many of the conversations that I've had always focus on data and digital, and it's amazing to see that you've got that piece in there to absolutely ensure that these vulnerable customers, because at the end of the day, there's so many people as well that probably don't have the digital skills to use the apps of the world today as well, which obviously in a pandemic environment, when you're then potentially having to still go through the usual physical cashier's desk, which may not be open due to COVID. So it puts a lot of strain and pressure on people. So that's amazing to hear. So you've kicked off these workshops, and obviously I know you guys have been working on this in a couple of guises over a period of time. And it'd just be really interesting to see what the sort of the next points are in your process within this skills and inclusion strategy. You're engaged with organisations. You're obviously, working hard with the schools to open that up. I just wondered what the kind of the next couple of stages that would be scheduled for you guys.
So really, Anthony, the next stage is to take all the component parts, because there's a lot of component parts that exist already, and piece them together into a picture around particularly those young people in schools. But we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that there are people later in their life who may want to consider careers in financial services, but actually really show to young people that there are a variety of different avenues that you can follow in order to get into careers in financial services. You may choose to go on to do an apprenticeship. You may choose to enter direct from school. You may choose to go to college or university. But it's and of course there are a number of sector-specific programs that exist as well, like Investment 2020, about attracting people from a more diverse background into investment management. But at the moment, those all exist in different places, and there isn't a single place that young people can go to understand, okay, if I'm looking for a career, then what are the decisions that I want to make, and when do I need to make them, and what are the type of decisions I need to make in school around the type of subjects and other things that I may want to consider doing. So really, I'd like to think that by the end of the year, we will have a really clear picture as to what that looks like. So my analogy on this, if you're looking for one, is that at the moment we've got a lot of the jigsaw pieces, but we've not made it clear what the picture on the outside of the box looks like, and that's really what we're driving towards, so that people know the choices that they make, where they may lead them.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, that would have been extremely beneficial to myself many years ago as well. I had to kind of go and find the hard way in what opportunities were out there, and what kind of skills you need for those roles as well. And mine was probably more of a hard knocks approach, but it would have been extremely beneficial for me to see those. So, I mean, now you've obviously, you've got this long career, obviously, within financial services. You've held these senior positions, covering across, kind of, as I mentioned, HR, transformation, director of people, for example. Now you're on the other side of the fence as such, really. I just wondered, what your thoughts were in terms of, how you're interacting with the financial service organisations, and what their kind of approach was in terms to, being bought in to this whole common goal around the skills gap. And have you seen a slightly different approach to, I don't know, maybe the way that they're adapting their inclusion policies or cultural approach to try and bring more talent in? I just wondered, have you seen a bit of a change to their approach?
I think that Anthony, undoubtedly inclusion and diversity are very much top of the agenda amongst many of our firms, and it has been for a long time. And I think that we can all track the path over recent years and the progress that has been made. That said, one of the challenges I have long presented back to the industry, even when I was, as you said, even when I was on the side of the fence of being inside an organisation, is actually you need to be much more courageous and brave about where you go and look for talent. And actually you will be surprised, and you will never regret going and looking for talent in places that you may have historically not gone and looked at. And my challenge to them is that your recruitment processes are quite often quite often have a bias built into them, where young people would either choose not to apply, or if they do, then the process is going to throw them out. So you end up recruiting a very narrow range of people into the organisation. So they need to challenge the recruitment processes. They need to really think carefully about actually the talent and skills that we need, and be brave and courageous in that area. And if I look at today, some of the skill gaps, not only within the financial services sector, but also in other sectors that we read about every day. Some of that is caused by Brexit, some of it has been caused by COVID. But the reality is that many industries haven't been brave and courageous enough to really think about where they go and find talent. And I think that in some ways is the last 9 months in particular has just brought that into sharper focus. So yes, a lot of progress made on D&I, but the reality is that there's a long way to go, and they need to be more courageous and brave in order. And part of my role here at SFE is to, in some ways, agitate, stimulate, try and disrupt some of that thinking across our members by bringing best practice that's happening in firms to others. So we do spend quite a bit of time here trying to say this firm over here is doing some really interesting things in the D&I space, and actually, how can we then bring those learnings to other members of in our SFE membership. So yes, progress been made, but still a long way to go.
Brilliant, absolutely, yeah. And I think it's one of those, we see it here at our organisation. We're specifically built for a more mature kind of student to be able to reskill them and bring the most in-demand tech skills so they can be completely relevant for today's market. But it is, I think it takes, some of our clients and organizations, they need to take just an honest look at themselves, in their approach, in their recruitment approach. You still see so many kind of old school activities, and as you mentioned, all that happens is you end up just constantly looking for the same type of person, and you're never really looking outside the box, and you're not giving that trust. I think they need to kind of build or put a bit of trust out there in individuals, and as you say, you'll be surprised where talent, passion, and some drive, will really bring into their workforce. So yeah, no, absolutely. And it's that honest reflection, I think, that sometimes they're missing because they're so caught up in the way that they've done business previously or for a long period of time, or if they've had the same management structure for a long period of time, they have the same process, and it can be difficult for them to move to a different approach, for them to be able to access new talent, and that's really, I think, one of the key things that they need to think about. So yeah, I fully agree with you on that side of the fence.
I think, Anthony, I think on that point, any business that doesn't have an early years strategy now, I think are really missing a trick, because the world of work has changed so rapidly, and the change will only get faster. That actually not to have a strategy that refreshes your workforce and brings in new skills and new, being able to contribute, particularly in that tech and digital space. If you take your eye off your ball, even for 12 months or 2 years, then you're going to be behind the curve. It's the refreshing the workforce has never been more important.
Absolutely, keeping them relevant, in demand, and it's not, once they're refreshing that workforce, but the other piece as well, if they have these types of programs in play, it will certainly impact the culture of their organization in a positive way, and probably help them retain talent for the longer term as well, because it's helping everyone move on as such, and keeping them up to speed and up to date with the latest tech, for example, if it was in the tech space. Because there's the piece around bringing new talent in, and then there's the retention of it, and that's the secondary piece, that we talk a lot about within the cultural awareness, and trying to have that kind of transparent or honest reflection on your organization, and trying to ensure that you're taking those steps to keep the workforce. And it was an interesting point actually that Nicola made as well in the previous episode, which was actually as well these days, but the workforce doesn't have to be so local. Much of the work these days is remote, and there's a very nice balance between remote setup, which means you can obviously stretch your arm that little bit further than just the local pool of talent, which hopefully is going to help everyone. Well, certainly on those points, I mean, thank you so much for your thoughts on that. I'd be really interested to hear as well. There's still a few months left of the year. I can't believe that we're actually getting to the tail end of it. It's crazy. It's flown by. But what's a successful year going to look like then for the SFE when we come to kind of Christmas or the end of the year? And obviously you've got the new strategy in play. What's some of the real kind of chunky items that you're looking to try and move on from this year and really build upon in next year?
Yeah, so I think we've probably got 2 or 3 things that we're really pretty clear about for the year end. And as I said earlier, you know, the majority of that is focused around the strategic themes in that strategy. So first of all is we talk about a real bold ambition around the journey to net zero. And it talks about what is our ambition as an industry to make Scotland a centre of excellence or expertise in that sustainable and green finance area. And by the end of the year, we would like to be able to articulate what that could be and what would need to happen in order for Scotland to be recognised in that area as a global leader. And that will involve engaging with other sectors, particularly the energy sector, as we look to bring together those connections with other areas that Scotland is renowned for, particularly in the whole engineering, renewables space, because by bringing some of that together, then we do think there's an opportunity for Scotland to play a big part in that sustainable and green finance area. So really being able to bring that ambition alive, Anthony, by the end of the year, and being quite clear what steps will then need to take place in order to make it happen is going to be a key output for us. Secondly, as we touched on, is skills and inclusion, and being in a position at the end of the year to really answer my question of the 14-year-old in the secondary school. Yeah. And actually, here are the pathways. If you're interested in careers in financial services, then this is the pathways that are ahead for you, and these are the type of support mechanisms that you could use to help you. And that will also include working with some third sector organisations, someone like Career Ready, who I'm obviously very close to as chair. But Career Ready does work a lot with young people who are thinking about careers in financial services. So how do we connect those points together in a way that young people, it's easy for young people to understand that. I think third area is undoubtedly, which is around that economic recovery area. It's one that we are very close to at the moment. We've had some external articles on this issue, but you know, clearly there's a lot of data points at the moment indicating the economic recovery is quite strong, but there's no doubt that is quite polarised in terms of sectors, and there's undoubtedly going to be impact on sectors over the course of the next 6 to 9 months. And financial services will have a key role in making sure that viable businesses continue to be viable in the medium to long term. You know, we cannot hide from the fact is that a lot of businesses have taken debt on for the first time in order to sustain their operation. And, you know, but ultimately there will be a new normal of economic activity, and financial services will play a key role in that. So while that's not a specific output by the end of the year, we as SFE, and particularly working with banks, are very mindful of our role in helping to continue to support businesses through and consumers through what will continue to be a very challenging time. And then the fourth one is, which is a clear output, is really sharpening up our proposition internationally to attract inward investment. We've done very well as a country over recent years, in many ways bucked the trend, but we need to refresh and just sharpen up what we are offering to businesses across the globe who are looking to set up in the UK and in Scotland. We're in competition with many other countries in the world, and and we need to leverage our strengths as a country. So you will certainly see in the last quarter this year a much sharper proposition around attracting that inward investment. Clearly, you mentioned earlier your session with Nicola, FinTech Scotland have been very successful in attracting new businesses to Scotland, which is great. And actually the FinTech cluster in Scotland is actually one of the things that we do need to leverage into that broader proposition for financial and professional services. because it's a real asset to Scotland. So again, how do we bring together those assets in a way that are quite compelling when we speak to companies who are maybe looking at 3 or 4 different locations across the world? Why Scotland? And that's something that we will have a much sharper focus on.
Amazing. Well, you've certainly got your hands full there, Sandy, and I'm pretty sure that's going to keep you out of trouble for some time. Well, thank you very much for your time today. I really appreciate that. It's been great. It's really insightful for certainly myself, and I know it will be for the listeners as well. Good luck for the rest of the year. I certainly hope that you achieve everything that you want to do. Certainly for the listeners, go out and have a look at the SFE website. Go through LinkedIn as well, and you can see a lot more detail in there, some of the white papers and the strategy that they've got embedded in there. It's a great read, and it will certainly educate us all on there. Thanks for your time. For the rest of the listeners, we'll have episode 5 will be the secondary piece that we'll be doing about technical skills and a deep dive. So please join us for that. Otherwise, thanks for your time today, Sandy, and speak again really soon. Thanks very much.
Thank you.